Hello, this is Michael Parsons. The next part of my journey towards realizing my traditional path, my spiritual path. Once I finished at the beach with my mom, I get into my truck and headed into Halifax to see my friend George, who was very sick living with HIV and AIDS. It turns out that going in to spend this time with George was a big part of my spiritual path. While I was there with George, I took him to his appointments and spent time with him. He was one of my childhood friends. You know, I knew George since I was in grade 3. It was a terrible time in that little town that we lived in, and he was really a friend that I made that I held on to for the rest of my life. So we did the things like helping him do his injection for the chemo that he was getting. He was getting a triple combo chemo for the AIDS lymphoma that he had. His leg was all swelled up. While I was home also, I met an artist who taught me how to paint. So I started doing these paintings, and you see these paintings hanging behind me. Those are some of the paintings that I did. I call those neo-primitivism. They have deep meaning to them. I don't have a whole lot of skill when it comes to having a brush in my hand or drawing, but I do understand the concepts, and these paintings have deep meaning to them. You know, like this wolf. You know, that's the two-spirited wolf. Hyoko wolf, red and black. Red and black are my primary colors. These paintings are self-portraits, the bear. The wolf, one of my spirit animals, the bear. Another one of my spirit animals with the red and the black, and then of course the pink running through it, ending up in the eye, represents the LGBT part of me. So these paintings have a lot of meaning, and then form a big part of my spiritual path and my spiritual awakening. You know, as time went on and I was spending time with this George, there came a time when he came out on the news that the 5-year AIDS strategy was not going to be renewed. And I knew I had to do something about that, because we needed that strategy. You know, this was in 1997, so it was important that this work continue. So I went to see George, so I decided that I had to do a cross-country tour, going across Canada, raising awareness about the AIDS strategy. So I went to the AIDS Coalition of Nova Scotia, and I was talking with Wilson Hodder about what I wanted to do. And Wilson said that he would be my anchor here in Nova Scotia, legitimizing me as I went across the country, so people would be able to call back to the AIDS Coalition and he would say, yes, he's doing this, yes, this is a thing that he's doing, and we're supporting him here in this work. So I got everything together, and it was time for me to go say goodbye to George. pretty much knowing that it was going to be the last time I'd ever see him. So I went to say goodbye, and I looked at him, and I just told him, I said, I don't want to leave, but it's, for some reason, there's something telling me that I need to do this. And he looked at me and he said, Michael, you came across the country to help me deal with the fact that I'm dying. You've done what you've needed to do here. You've helped me in the way that I needed help. Now it's time for you to go and help all of us, because we need this national AIDS strategy. So after saying goodbye to George, I was on my way back to my home in Halifax, and just to get the last couple of things to pack the truck as I was leaving. And as I was getting everything in the truck, I was in the driveway and just getting ready to pull out, and my father came out to the truck. And he told me, he said, son, I need to talk to you. He said, and this time with no whiskey. And he looked at me and he said, when you leave here, you need to find a place to die. Because I don't want my son dying of AIDS on welfare in Nova Scotia and embarrass me within my church. My father had become an Orthodox priest. Now this is an important thing and an important story, because as I go through this journey, things will be made aware to me. Things were made aware to me while I was on this journey around why my father told me that. And it wasn't necessarily coming from my heart, but it was something that I had to hear as part of my spiritual path. So I got on the road, and first thing I did was drove to Pictou. I did an interview with the Mail Star. It was on the second page. Person living with AIDS gets ready to cross Canada in the middle of winter in his old Ford truck to fight for the national AIDS strategy. It was on the second page of the Mail Star. So that was my coming out in Halifax, was in the newspaper about getting ready to do this cross-country tour. So the first thing I did was I went to Pictou, the town of Pictou, to see my grandmother, who was in the seniors home in Pictou, to say goodbye to my grandmother. So we talked for a bit, and then I was on the road driving. So I was on my way through and drove till I got to Toronto. And when I got to Toronto, I stayed with a friend of mine, Stefan. And the heater cord broke in the truck. I didn't know what to do. I just barely had enough money to be able to pay for gas to get going from place to place, never mind doing repairs on the truck. So I started doing my advocacy and calling around, and I called around and did some interviews for print media, and didn't get any television interviews, but I did print media and I did some radio interviews. And through that process, I ended up being put in touch with the water company that provided the water for Pride. And those people that provided the water for Pride paid for the parts that the truck needed to fix the heater core. And one of the people who partially owned that bottled water company also had ownership in the Volvo dealership in Toronto. So the Volvo dealership did the work and the water company paid for the parts. They put the heater core in the truck, and I was able to get on my way. So I got on my way again, going across the country, traveling through Ontario. As I was going through Ontario, I ran into all kinds of problems. But eventually I got through Ontario and I made it to Winnipeg. 40 below. First time I ever experienced 40 below. So the people in Winnipeg helped me out quite a bit. 9 Circles ended up helping with the bed and breakfast. So the bed and breakfast allowed me to stay there, and then that bed and breakfast, that guy from the bed and breakfast donated the money to the 9 Circles, and then 9 Circles gave it back to him and gave him a receipt, so that he was able to get a receipt for the time that I was staying there. And the ones that supported me the most was really the drag community in Winnipeg, who, you know, they did a fundraiser for me after my welcome was finished at that bed and breakfast. And there was a drag queen who allowed me to stay at his place for a while, and they did a fundraiser for me and fundraised enough money for me and gave me that money, which got me to Regina, which was my next stop on my way through. And when I was in Regina, I did another fundraiser. It was another not-for-profit bar owned by the community. And they did a fundraiser for me. We did an art show and fundraiser of the paintings, and they did a fundraiser, and they raised enough money to get me to Saskatoon. And then while I was in Saskatoon, I connected in with the PWA Society. And they stayed alive through bingos. They did bingos, so they allowed me to work a couple of bingos, and of course I made a little bit of money there, and they donated some more money to me, and then that money was enough to get me across to BC. So I arrived in Vancouver, BC in time for the Healing Our Spirit conference. So I attended that conference, that Healing Our Spirit conference, and when that was done, I had enough money to get back to Saskatchewan again. So I got back to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and there I stayed. I got on social services, was able to get an apartment, and then I was there living in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. So this is where I'll stop this part. The next video that I do will be about meeting the old man who eventually adopted me as his son. and how I met that old man and what my ancestors put in my path to be able to facilitate that. Thank you for listening.